Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast. Pete booked himself on a new test plane. I'm curious to see how things go with that. It's something called the Valkyrie. Anyway, he's not here today. Today, we're talking about Minute 90, which begins with Schmidt's Hydra metaphor at work and ends with Steve trying to get drunk. Back on the show, sadly for the last time this season, is Lorraine Dahm. Hello, Lorraine.
Hello.
So before we jump into the minute and talk more about the Hydra hangar and the Valkyrie and the Whip and Fiddle and all this good stuff, Captain America, favorite Captain America moment for you? Do you have something? We love discussing this with our guests. It could be from the movies, from the comics. What would you say is your favorite Captain America moment?
It's a strange one, but I just loved how it was so different from all the others. In Captain America, the Winter Soldier, when Barack kind of challenges him to a fight, and Captain America takes off his helmet, his hair is kind of mussed, and he's like, all right, let's do this. He just looked like a young boy who was like, all right, I get to fight. Prior to that, his characterization in the movies had been sort of the stodgy old man who was out of his element and out of his time. And that one, coupled with him jumping out of the plane a few moments ago without a parachute, it just showed him as like, you know what, really? He's a young, like he was in the ice for 70 years, but he's really just a 24, 25, 26-year-old guy. And I just thought that was a very cute moment, given how much he wanted to fight when he was a runt and couldn't.
That's actually a good moment. I like that. And that hasn't been called out before. So that's an interesting one to call out. I like that. And it's funny, you make me think about the aging and stuff because, he was born in 1918 and went into the ice in 1945. So that, when he goes into the ice, he's 27 years old, but then he's frozen. And I guess cryogenically, is the idea that happens. And so he's left in the ice. So technically when he comes out, he still is 27-ish. But yeah, it's his body obviously is so much older. But yeah, I mean, it speaks to young Steve. And I think that's something that is we've talked about a lot in the show is just the idea of puny Steve versus muscle-bound Steve. And how throughout this film, so often it really does feel like it's still the puny Steve brain working in there. Like, he hasn't been big muscle bound Steve for that long. And so he's still reacting like a scrawny person would. But I like that you call that moment out because it does feel like this is this guy who was puny and now he's big. But it's like that moment he's almost going back to that alley fight at the beginning of this film. Mm-hmm. And saying, yeah, let's do it the old-fashioned way, back to my old days, but now I can take you. And it's kind of a fun little opportunity there. All right, well, with that, let's jump into our minute. So we're finishing up in the Hydra headquarters in the Valkyrie hangar. And here we have Hugo Weaving as Red Skull finishing his speech to his pilots. He drinks his wine. And I guess I want to start with this is, he has this line at the start of this minute. If they shoot down one plane, hundreds more shall rain fire upon them. If they cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place. Hail Hydra. It's some interesting Hydra metaphors that he has there. I mean, the first one's the metaphor. The second one is literally what they always say. If they cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place. But this whole idea of like, if they shoot down one plane, hundreds more shall rain fire upon them. I kind of like the way that he's playing around with the Hydra metaphors throughout this. I mean, how does that play for you?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, it just was plain old scary in that, like, the undefeatable enemy, or just if we can't beat you with technology and with whatever, we're just going to throw waves upon waves of people at you. That like fighting back is futile, which is always like a rallying cry. But it just comes off as somebody who still has a lot of things up his sleeve, because for, the previous few minutes, we're seeing montages of bases being destroyed and Zola's been captured and, he's losing a ton of stuff. And here he is saying, we haven't even scratched the surface of our resources.
It's a very interesting speech. And I like the way that he does kind of tie in that whole Hydra metaphor. Like, it just feels like, I feel like that's a very villainous way to describe anything. It's like, they take one of our guys out, we send two more in. Like, it makes you always feel never ending, Mm-hmm. And I think especially the concept of Hydra as it's going to continue through the decades, the fact that it also just kind of permeates. And I know this Hydra that he's talking about, it's more like the attack. There will always be more to fight, but it does kind of weave nicely into the later Hydra about the kind of the insinuation of, taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. and kind of weaving their way in. I think that's pretty clever.
Or if you root it out of one thing, it's already into others.
Exactly, yeah. What do you think of the Hydra salute? We get to see it, all of the pilots do it when he says, "Hail Hydra." Do you like the two-armed modification of essentially the Nazi salute?
Yeah. I get why they couldn't use the Nazi salute, and I'm frankly glad they didn't, but it's still scary. And as I said in yesterday's minute, like, just rows upon rows of soldiers, especially when they're in creepy masks or non-human form, just ready to go out and annihilate, is always scary. It's just one of those primal things where it's like, this is not a good situation. And the fact that they had like a hand signal and they were still so organized and still so determined, when they were, supposedly in a losing situation, it's creepy. It had a like almost a horror tinge to it.
It's interesting. As a Star Wars fan, we have seen through the years scenes of stormtroopers in similar sorts of ranks where you have row upon row of stormtrooper and they're all standing there. I'm trying to remember if I don't feel like there ever is a situation where you have like stormtrooper salutes or anything.
Mm-mm.
There's something about the way that you get mass salutes like this that really it's very off-putting, because it puts you into a situation where you feel really like, if you're not agreeing with everything going on, you feel really out of control, like, and overwhelmed by the scope. And even when it's just him, because initially it's just him, and we've seen this once before where he was in the lab back in their factory up in the, in their base up in the mountains in Austria. You have this. It's a small salute, but he says "Hail Hydra," and you have a few of the soldiers just do a single "Hail Hydra" with their arms up, and then Zola's like "Hail Hydra," and he kind of says it in a panic without actually saluting. But that's the first time we see the salute, and it's creepy. It's also off-putting. But here you've got these 8 guys, and I jokingly kind of called them gimps earlier because they're all in these like tight black leather outfits that but they're very, very frightening looking. And like, if I came across somebody in an outfit like this, I would be terrified, because they seriously look like they're designed to do harm.
Yeah.
They don't look like kind people. And
their purpose.
Yeah, they have a very specific and malicious purpose. And so it's pretty terrifying. And when they do that salute, it's pretty scary. And I get that moment. And then you get the reveal. And this is what we were talking about in yesterday's minute, where you have this setup as you have Red Skull walk up to the table. He's looking at something behind us and kind of scanning across it to kind of evaluate something. We just don't know what until now, because now the camera booms up and tilts down, revealing hundreds of troops behind him. I was trying to actually count. It's hard to tell because they kind of start melting together at a certain point, but it looks to be about 20 rows deep and maybe 25 or 30 columns wide. So I'm guessing it's 500 to 600 troopers in this space here. And it's really pretty frightening to see like that many people, especially once they start saluting. I mean, that's where it really kind of throws you when you see just that massive amount of people doing this.
Well, and I think it's like the earnestness of the salute too. I think we all watched Hogan's Heroes after school when we were kids, and how they would kind of do lackadaisical salutes, just to show that nobody was really totally into it, like
Right.
we feared. And so, like, the fact that you see these people, like, they have drank the Kool-Aid, they have bought into this, and they are willing to do as much as Schmidt is at this point. And that, anytime it's a cult of personality, it's scary. And then when we know the personality involved, it's just worse.
Yeah, right. That's very terrifying, very terrifying. I can't tell from looking at the group. There's some great digital technology, obviously, of group duplication with kind of a repeated camera move where they used it like in Forrest Gump when you have all the people around the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C., and they just moved the same, 50 people from one group to one spot to the next spot to the next spot to the next spot, and eventually got them all the way around the whole thing. And then they combined all of it digitally, but it was all real people. And so it was a very smart way to kind of create a shot that was full of real people, but it was just the same people duplicated. Because this space is so artificial, I mean, this massive hangar, you can see how wide it is. I mean, it's a 540-foot wide plane, so obviously the space is easily 600 plus feet. And here we have this massive group of these people. I can't imagine that they were filming this in a stage that could fit 500 people, in a space like this. So my guess is they probably digitally did some of this by duplicating, like, fake duplicating the people, not with moving them around. But it's very difficult to tell because, again, they're all in their Gimp outfits.
Well, I assume that's one of the reasons for the Gimp outfits. I mean, obviously the visual is the most important, but it's a lot easier to duplicate faceless or featureless, I should say, costumed people than it is to that guy with the mole is every fifth person. So.
Yeah, right. Although I should say the ones behind him aren't the pilots, so they do have their mouths exposed. So at least we can kind of see some mouths moving and stuff.
I don't know, it's still scary.
It is. Oh, it is.
However they made it.
Yeah, it still is overwhelming. And we do, of course, they all are holding the Arnimulation 99L assault weapons. Those are the fantastic guns designed by Zola that blast the Tesseract energy, so they're fun to see. I also, just as a last moment in this, when we do get the moment where Schmidt sips his white, he does this great little smack of his lips and pulls his lips back for a second as he drinks it. I really like the way that plays. It feels, I don't know, I love the way that Hugo Weaving does these little things with this character that I find work exceptionally well.
He's savoring his moment. Like it's writ large, but it also feels like super personal.
When you're walking around with a silly red face like this, it makes sense to play small and little because it just ends up becoming so much more intimidating.
Well, and the fact that it's such he's doing a fairly human, smacking my lips in front of a bunch of faceless subordinates too, I think kind of says something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't even thinking about the fact we were talking about how there's no additional glasses for anyone else and he's just drinking by himself. It's like, how are they going to drink? They'll have to take their entire head thing off. They can't do anything. So it's very funny. All right. So we leave this particular location and end up in the Whip and Fiddle. It is an evening in London. The bombings have obviously been happening because, we're in rubble, basically. And it's an evening and, we have Peggy walking delicately through the rubble to enter this destroyed building on the hunt of Steve Rogers, who she finds sitting at a table, drinking by himself, thinking about Bucky. My first question for you is, as you watched the film, did you ever have any sense that this was the same bar that they had been in earlier?
Yeah.
You did? Okay.
Yep. Just the way the bar, the actual bar, like curved around, because that was where Bucky and Steve sat when they were drinking and talking before Peggy came in the first time.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's interesting though the way that it's set up, because it's not ever called out that this is the same place. It could be any ruined place. It doesn't even have to be a bar. It's
Right.
interesting that it specifically ended up being the place. But yeah, I suppose it does make sense that he would be thinking about those last good moments with Bucky, and and he would return to the spot where he had those before.
Mm-hmm.
And why Peggy would look for him there, because this is where she probably last saw them together as well.
Right. And I like how the 5 scenes through now they've all been lit progressively darker, which is sort of following Steve's emotional journey, even though he hasn't been present in any of the scenes except for the very beginning of the first and now the last few seconds of the last. Just darker and darker and darker, and like purposefully dark, not just like how things are filmed now, which is in the dark. But
yeah.
but yeah, it just like I love that sort of subtle showing of Steve's journey, even when he's not around.
That is nice. And we also talked about this mirroring a little bit of the villain and the hero, and how we didn't specifically call that out, but the idea that in the last scene we had Schmidt there with alcohol, and he was kind of toasting his successes and his accomplishments and his plans moving forward. And this is another nice mirroring moment where we now cut to Steve, and he is doing the same thing. He is sitting at a table with his own alcohol, but he is mourning his losses and what has been taken away from him.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that nice mirroring between hero and villain that we have playing across these two scenes. And it's interesting because that last scene that we had of Schmidt in the script takes place several scenes after this. So we would have gone from the interrogation room to this, to I think the headquarters, and then Steve on the motorcycle, and then we're cutting into the Valkyrie hangar. And so I think smartly, again, I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that Johnston realized there's this nice mirroring between the characters and the way that he could potentially play that. Am I reading too much into it, or do you feel that there's something there between the moments with these characters and their alcohol?
Yeah, I just feel like it's a very smooth transition that way too. Like you had one guy, like you said, celebrating a success or, to the future, and the other one drinking by himself, not crying. No. He wasn't crying. And mourning things that are gone.
I like the way that plays. Well, and it's, because I suppose you could have Schmidt in a position where he would be mourning the capture of Zola, but it's interesting. Like the idea of Zola doesn't come up at all. Like he's not concerned. As Phillips alluded to, they likely decoded the message and know that he is now working with the Allies in exchange for his freedom and everything. And so it doesn't even come up. But it does make me wonder if there's an element to expediency as far as the plans with the Valkyrie on Red Skull's part because of that. And I guess I really hadn't thought about that, but it does make me wonder, is he really kicking things into gear now because of all this?
Yeah, like they know his secret weapon exists, so he's got to use it before they destroy it.
Yeah, they know it exists. They know where it is. All of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has to take all that into account.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. A nice little touch in this scene that I really enjoy is hearing the speaker playing through the streets of London. letting people know what they need to be doing. And it's saying, your attention, please, all citizens to remain indoors until further notice. Blackout is still in effect throughout the London areas. Please wait for the all clear. And it's just playing in repeat in the background as Peggy comes in. And I don't know, just moments like that, you hear a siren going off in the distance. There's small oral elements added to this. I mean, it's a set that we're on, obviously, but they add so much to help create a sense of the place and the space.
Yeah, and just not necessarily the history, but that war is a lived thing, and that people who aren't involved in the war at all are still, having to do blackouts and are still getting bombed and are still, I mean, London at that time was mostly civilians because, everyone else was out fighting in continental Europe. And so, I don't know, it just kind of brought it home for everyone, I guess. Even though they weren't on the front, they weren't safe.
No, it's interesting, and I like that they're incorporating real world elements into it. And I think that it plants this story in a place that feels real, feels lived in.
Right. They make the fantastic believable by making the mundane believable.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so Peggy and Steve, where do you stand on the relationship between these two characters? Do you buy it? Do you like the way they're portrayed?
I loved their relationship in this movie and in later ones. I guess I didn't believe in spoiler for Endgame when he chooses to go back in time to be with her. That just doesn't seem like an action he would take. But as it is in this movie, they're wonderful together. I liked how she liked him back when he was a runt, and I like how she also didn't take any guff from him when he was Captain America, where she literally shot his shield. So yeah, she's feisty. Her TV show getting canceled was a dark day. I mean, it was a wonderful TV show. Yeah, I just think they're the greatest together.
Well, what do you think of the way that this scene plays? This is, she knows Steve is in mourning. This is, again, several days after they've returned from the Alps and the loss of Bucky. And here he is just kind of sitting here in mourning. And she's, essentially, kind of coming here to find him and try to comfort him. Do you like the way it plays?
Yeah, I mean, I really like that Marvel showed him mourning and being sad rather than the usual I'm going to get violent and beat up somebody or typical man responses. I liked that they showed him being emotional and truly missing a friend. That's rare. And then I also like that, I mean, given the actual time difference in the movie and in the scenes that played out, I mean, we know it's been a couple days. And so I feel like either this is the first time he's had time to mourn Bucky, or she tried to give him some space and now has to kind of set him right. You've mourned, that's good, that's healthy, let's keep mourning. But, as goes on in other things, she also kind of reminds him that, there'll be time to mourn after the war. She's the one seeing the mission at this point, and I don't know. I feel like that's what he needed at the moment.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth with her, the way she's handling Steve and interacting with him, and is she in this just for the science? Is she in this because she really loves him? Does she only love him because he got all hunky and muscly? And then, when she shows up at the camp in Italy, and kind of casually drops, "Oh, that's the 107th," and he's just like, "Oh, I'm Bucky," and he runs off to go save Bucky, and she kind of unintentionally, at least the way that it's played in the film, gets him out of his USO rut and actually out into the field, which is nice to see. But there are so many moments where I feel like I want to feel like Peggy was having more agency in guiding him along that path. I never quite feel they do. It's just kind of, she seems to be there and kind of saying things that trigger things for him, but it all seems unintentional. And so I love that she's kind of the representative of the SSR and kind of there to kind of talk to Steve and have these moments. But sometimes I do feel like I wish there was a better sense of the position she'd had in trying to guide him as this experiment, you know?
Right. I mean, there is a little bit of, I mean, when they're in the car together when they first meet, he's still runty. You know, you get a little bit of attraction there. Like you get that he thinks she's a pretty girl that's out of his league, and she thinks he's like clever or whatever. And you like that, but yeah, it would be nicer to see her actually doing some field work too. I mean, there's a reason why they wanted her on the line rather than back in London doing whatever. So I would have liked to see her do more stuff, but I guess my opinion is also clouded by the TV show where we did get to see her do all that.
Yeah. Right. And in the one shot, which was a nice, I guess, test for the show.
Yes.
We don't get a whole lot of their conversation. I'm going to save that for next week. But what we do have here is this moment where he's talking about Erskine and the serum. And again, we don't really get the whole thing with him being drunk and stuff, but I do like that this is an element that I think it's interesting for a person in grief. And sometimes when you're in grief, you want to kind of wallow in your sorrow and just have a bunch of alcohol, get drunk, so you don't have to get like mired in the realities. And
right.
That's an interesting element for a character like this who can't do that.
Yeah, like one of his coping methods have been taken away. Not that he was, ever shown as being somebody who drank away problems, but yeah, like something you're used to and turn to help you doesn't help you anymore.
Yeah, right.
It's also like the only way out of grief is through. And so to not be able to do one of the steps is, I think it probably stymies you more in general then, because you have to, not only do you have to navigate your grief journey, but now you have to navigate a journey around this one that used to be an easy step, but now it takes you longer.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. And I'll be exploring that some more. But I do like that it's an element that really is like they weren't afraid to kind of like get into that here. And so I think that's a valuable part of this character and his journey.
To shove aside his grief for a moment, which is terrible. I don't know. It always made me wonder about other things. Like, does he have a metabolism that just won't quit? Like, does he have to eat?
Yeah, right.
Thousands upon thousands of calories a day? Or like, can he still get drunk? And would he just have to drink unhealthy amounts? Or like, like does aspirin work for him? And like if he needs a blood transfusion, then does his powers go down? Or like, I don't,
Yeah, no kidding. So many questions. Or like She-Hulk, if his blood got into somebody else, would they, well, I guess, obviously they draw a bunch of his blood.
Right.
Of course, we didn't talk about it in that episode, but thinking about it, it's like, how do they get a needle through his skin? It's like,
right. Yeah.
The questions.
Or like, why didn't it like close up before they could draw a reasonable amount?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like you would assume he has super clotting.
Yeah, exactly. It's very funny. My only other note here is I love this scene, and it may just be the way that Peggy is dressed as she kind of comes in here in like this trench coat, this military trench coat, but it feels very Casablanca. Like I get this kind of this vibe of the 40s films, and I that's something right. I really enjoy that Johnston was trying to capture throughout the entirety of the film, is that sense of time, and I feel like he did it exceptionally well.
Yeah, her outfits in particular were great, but he did a very good job of celebrating the 40s without mocking them, I guess would be maybe too strong of word. Like a lot of times, especially like 70s and 80s and 90s movies, that were made now, but set then, they're sort of wink-winky about the fashion. Like the characters are wearing it, but it's supposed to be funny, or it's supposed to be like good grief. Did we actually wear that? But the characters look nice and they're proud of looking nice in this movie. Like even when in the alley scene when Bucky came in and he was wearing his uniform just in the street. You know, he was doing it to impress the chicks. Like,
Yeah, right.
you know, he thought he looked pretty fine in his uniform. And so, like, to see kind of people just being people and like liking their fashion and stuff like that, it was very refreshing.
I love it. It's good stuff. All right, well, we'll wrap it up there and talk more about all of this, the Whip and Fiddle and Peggy and Steve next week. But Lorraine, thank you so much for joining me all week.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a wonderful conversation about so many different aspects of the loss of Bucky, the morning, Steve's morning process, the interrogation, Schmidt and his plane. Lots of good stuff to chat about this week.
Zola's inner hopes and dreams.
Right. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And everybody else, remember, you can go to Marvel Movie Minute, learn more about what we're up to, learn about our membership program to get early access to the episodes, avoid getting all the ads. And that's it. So until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.